When you think of religion, it's buildings like this that come to mind. This is St. Peter's Cathedral in Adelaide. But just over here is another venue that represents that other religion in Australia. So this is Adelaide Oval. It's the home of cricket and AFL here in Adelaide. It's a sacred site. You know, as a small nation in the bottom end of the world that had a dubious origin, we've used sport to make a mark on the global scene. And yet our passion for sport with religious zeal hasn't taken the place of faith. In fact, religion and sport have had a curious and mostly positive relationship. In this episode, you're going to meet the first sporting world champion that Australia ever had who found faith in his life. You're going to discover that winning doesn't deliver everything you need. You need religion as well. And as well as that, you're going to find that there's a positive relationship between competition and believing faith. Faith runs deep in our nation, both in our cathedrals and our sporting arenas.
When I was 5 years old, I read an article about American cowboy Larry Mahan, and he was world champion 5 times and stuff, and so I think from then, you know, I think I was serious then, you know, wow. At 5, and then that was all I really wanted to do was I'd eat, sleep, drink, just ride.
Wow.
That was it, yeah.
About 5 years old when I started running. My mum was a really good runner. My uncle was a good runner, so it was already in the family. And I remember watching the Barcelona Olympics on TV, and I was watching the women's distance running events come round. I just remember being so inspired by watching those women, and I remember turning to my mum and dad, this is as a 10-year-old, and saying, oh, I'm going to do that one day.
Like the first time you ran on as a professional player?
Oh, the nerves were just all over the place. And funny enough, it was right here where we are on this bit of turf, and against my old team, Richmond, the team that I grew up barracking for.
I guess as a young guy, always loving cars and loving speed. It wasn't until I was about 33 when I had the opportunity to get into racing. A couple of friends, I guess, were doing a race. They invited me along, and yeah, we loved cars, and so we just went along, and we qualified horribly back in like second last. Had no idea what we were doing in terms of car setup. And I just got the opportunity to get a hold of a car and start racing.
I grew up in a little place called Wheelmaringle. It's west of Bourke, still very remote little place. It's the Culgoa River. It's a tributary off the Darling River, and the little river ran right next to our mission. Not a great community to grow up in. And it was the toughest childhood. You had your structure in your family, but it's very remote. We never had a police station. And when you get remoteness and you mix in grog with that, just ask the women and children.
At 15, you'd chosen to play football for the Australian juniors. How did that happen?
It was the greatest thing because you got selected.
Yeah.
But the most important person in my life wasn't there. My mum died when I was a young kid.
Oh, Pete.
So by the time I could fly and really show people what I can do as a player, the one person I really wanted to be there wasn't there.
Mm.
So there was this mixed up young boy who would just go and play the best I could, but look in the grandstand or around car parks looking for my mum.
So your sporting break is going to play for Easts. What was that like, moving to the big city?
Well, I think if you were an Aboriginal young footballer in my time, Arthur Beetson was the pinnacle. So to receive a phone call from Arthur Beetson to say, come and play under me, I was on the next plane.
Yeah.
And because it's like a dream to be able to play rugby league on the big stage.
Sydney life, pretty different from the country. How did that affect you?
Unfortunately, it can have a negative impact on young boys from the bush as well. If you're not prepared for it, it can take you down the wrong track. At the height of my career, injuries come, and I broke my arm, so you had time when you don't have all those other things. And unfortunately for me, grog was there.
Right, just be real tough, Shane. Go on now, ride now. Go on, Shane. Go on, Shane. Keep trying it. Keep going. Keep riding. Good, good, good. Keep riding. Keep riding. Keep riding.
What was the pinnacle of your career?
In 1979, I won the junior saddle bronc at the Calgary Stampede in Canada, and yeah, I'd say that would be the best international event that I'd ever won. And then in 1980, I was runner-up in the same event.
What was your worst moment?
I had a saddle bronc go end for end on me at a rodeo at Alpha.
Wow. That means that the horse rolled forward.
Yeah, yes. The first thing that hits the ground is your face, and then the whole horse. You're still in the saddle. The whole horse goes right over the top and bends you back over the saddle, and that saddle hits you across the back, and then the whole weight of the horse comes down on you. It can break your back real quick.
The outcome of all your hard work was actually competing at an international level. What was that like, walking out on the London Olympics?
It was amazing. My dream was coming true in that moment, standing on the starting line at my first Olympics, and all the injuries and the heartbreak and the setbacks that I'd gone through, all the disappointments, all the times that I wanted to quit, all the times that I was on crutches, and all the times that I was running in freezing cold water, and continuing to just push on and believe that that one day my chance would come up.
Yeah. You said that missing out on the Olympics caused you to come to personal faith. What was the process in that? What happened?
Yeah, so I was 16 when I qualified for my first Olympics. I was in year 11 at school, and running was who I was. It was everything to me. It was soon after that I'd just been told that I would miss the Olympics through this injury, and a new girl came over. Her name was Lisa, and she sat beside me and she said, "Hey, I just want you to know that I've been praying for you." In that moment, it just really touched me that she had this idea of God, that she could pray to him for something so trivial as my injury. Even though it was a big deal to me, I thought that God was so far away from it. I didn't realise that he cared. I went to church with my new friend Lisa, and I heard the gospel. I heard about Jesus. After a couple of weeks, I decided that this is what I wanted to live for. I wanted to live for Jesus.
Did you think that you'd win a flag? Did you think when you first came up here, you're playing for Brisbane, did you think the Lions were going to win anything?
I didn't, to be honest, Carl. I didn't think we were a chance, because we really, in the first 7-8 years of my career, we were 3 times wooden spooners, 3 times finishing on the bottom. And
wow.
1998, we finished last, and the reality was, without a massive turnaround, we were in all sorts of trouble, and I didn't know how long my career had left, but the master stroke was being able to get Lee Matthews to come up to coach the team, and he took us from last in 1998 to losing a preliminary final to the Kangaroos in 1999, who eventually won the grand final.
That's a year.
Leaping forward in your career, you won 3 flags with the Brisbane Lions. What was it like winning a premiership?
Well, Lee Matthews promised us if we were able to climb the mountain and succeed, that it would be an exhilarating feeling, and it was more than that, let me tell you. It was brilliant. It was a huge relief.
Within Australia, it almost seems like sport is one of our religions. How popular is it?
It's very popular. In the average week in season, AFL, which is our #1 sport by attendance, you get 340,000 Australians will turn up to a game. NRL, National Rugby League, comes in second. We only get about 140,000 attending games in a regular week of rugby league. And then you've got the A-League, where they get about 50,000 attending games over a weekend in season. Now you add all of that up, and it's a little over 500,000 Aussies attending sport. So that's pretty solid. What's interesting is that I mentioned that figure of 4 million attending church every week. And so while religion of sport is very strong, the religion of religion, Christianity, is stronger, because the 500,000 attending a footy game in total across all of the codes doesn't quite measure up to the 4 million who attend church. And even if half of them are only there in a given week, still that's 2 million. That's a lot more than at the stadiums.
Here we are on that. What is this called? Is this the first?
This is Mountain Straight.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a mountain straight. So you come up here, and it actually come over the top of this little sort of crest here. The car gets really light.
Yeah.
This is turn 2, so this is a really important corner to carry the speed into. I was in the ute here one day. We slowed down just a little bit. I got to this point here, and just about to turn in, well, 3 wide, and I got a tap on the left-hand rear, and actually ended up into the concrete fence just here. So then this is going down to the S's, and I had a big accident here in a supercar where I've come down here, and a guy decided to rejoin the circuit at that exact moment.
Wow.
I've done some great overtaking moves here around the outside of someone coming over the top of the mountain. It tightens up on the way in, and we call this the dipper. We're about to go down now, and the actual front wheel goes off the ground as you come down here.
They nearly both went. Andrew Fisher, final turn, Jesus Ford picks up the win.
My famous great-grandfather was pretty much part of the air we breathed from when I was a young kid. In year 8, I did a history assignment, and I did it on my great-grandfather, Edward Trickett, and I'd been to Uralla, to his grave site. The first world champion was a Trickett. There was a beautiful big portrait that would hang in my auntie's house that we would visit every Sunday afternoon. And, there's Ned at his, in his sculls with his oars and, looking incredibly strong and muscular and lean and tall. And, I did relate to that because I wasn't muscular, but I was tall and skinny. I didn't really take after Ned as far as my sporting prowess. I'm not competitive, but I'm a perfectionist.
She's a strong character. She's a strong person, strong mind, strong personality, wrapped in a beautifully soft personality. It's a very endearing character mix.
Ned Trickett was the first Australian ever to win a world championship event in any sport. In those days, sculling was a popular sport all over the world because most nations were based on maritime history, and therefore rowing was an important, wasn't really a sport, it was a skill you had to have really for trade and to get from one place to another because there weren't many bridges or whatever. Ned Trickett was a very good rower, raised on the Parramatta River, and off he went to represent Australia against the world champion Joseph Henry Sadler, the famous Joseph Henry Sadler on the River Thames. And on the 27th of June 1876, when Australia was still virtually a convict colony, he defeated the Englishmen, and the English press went into shock. They didn't know what to say. They were just so embarrassed. Had they known Ned Trickett was the son of a convict, imagine what would happen then. Well, it raised such excitement in Australia that suddenly Australia was proud of itself. When Ned Trickett returned to Sydney Cove, Circular Quay, at the end of that year, in November, there were 30,000 people at the quay to greet him, and that figure per capita has never been matched, even from a visit by the Beatles or the Queen or the Pope.
He comes back to Australia, he's a huge hero. What does he then do?
Well, he was feted, that means celebrated incredibly, and they built a hotel for him called Trickett's International Hotel. It's still there. Everybody went to that to see the great man himself. But then he finally went off to England to row against the Canadian Hanlon, Edward Hanlon, who was quite famous and a rather controversial figure. But in 1880, Ned Trickett lost against Hanlon on the River Thames.
So if we met you at that stage, what were you like?
I was always trying to be, you know, the life of the party, I suppose, you know, if it was all or nothing kind of thing. And in 1982, it was going to be the first $1 million rodeo in Melbourne and Sydney. And so I thought maybe I'll find it down here, find what I'm looking for down here. So I went to Melbourne first, and, you know, I'd do what I always do, would just drink all night. I saw these other guys from the US, because there's a lot of international riders there, and instead of going to the bar like we did, they'd go round to this hall. I thought, I don't care what it cost me or what happens, I'm going to see what these guys have got that I haven't got. And I went to, they had a Cowboy Church service, Glenn Smith preached there, and a bikie from God Squad actually gave his testimony. And I thought, if God can help him, he can help me, from what he said, you know. And so that was the first time I heard that that I was, you know, a sinner, born separated from God, and that I need to invite Jesus to come into my life and be my Lord and Saviour. And after they finished praying and I accepted the Lord then, yes.
You're 2 years into your career, you've become a Christian. How does the interaction between being a Christian and being a professional sportsman, how does that work?
For me, early days, it was a struggle to actually understand how does it work. But there was a moment in 1994, early in my faith, there was a moment where I really went through a dark patch. And it was in that moment and through that moment that I realised how important true faith is. I literally found myself at that moment and coming through that battle saying to God, it's got to be about you, and I've got to put you first and foremost. And it actually freed me up. It took a lot of the pressure and anxiety off me as an elite athlete, but it just told me that there was so much life beyond football as well, and so much identity and purpose beyond football. And I ended up playing better football because of it as well. And God determined that I would stay in there for another 10 years beyond that battle.
As a racing car driver, you know, you get the question. The Christians say, oh, is it fair to beat other people? Shouldn't you let other people win? Which is kind of strange because you're a professional sports person, and the idea is to win. But yeah, there's no point winning without winning with integrity.
An important thing about Ned Trickett, so he went off to England and it was cold and miserable compared to here. I'm not making excuses for him, nor did he. He said on the day he was beaten by a better man. He was a really fair man. Yeah. He was a really honourable man. Sadly, a lot of Australia lost interest in him because he was a loser.
He went to Rockhampton in a business venture that didn't work out.
Well, It was pretty successful for a while, and then came the big depression of the 1890s, and of course Rockhampton went belly up because so much money invested in gold mines was borrowed. I know Trickett lost some money in those ventures, but he came back to Sydney destitute. There he was, wandering the streets looking for a job just like everybody else. A world champion now walking the street looking for a job. How would you feel?
You only last a couple of years in Sydney. You end up coming back. What's it like coming back?
It was like a biggest disappointment. It's like I let so many people down. I put so much effort and time and gave up so much, but I was still drinking way too much, and when the injuries just took away everything.
What sort of things changed for you?
I met this beautiful woman.
That's always a good thing.
She was just the most beautiful thing. And she had also had a tough upbringing. Christianity was in her life as well. I don't know how difficult it must have been for her to live with me through those turbulent couple of years. But she just would not give up. And she just kept praying for me. Then there came that crunch when I knew I couldn't deal with it anymore. I made the decision that I would end my life. So I said goodbye to her one night. I did a study in my work. 1,200 trucks per day travel through the Newell Highway through our hometown of Parks at the time. 1,200 trucks. So I made the decision that I would take my car, park it somewhere close, and pick one of those 1,200 because they literally came past every few minutes. So this night I made the decision that I couldn't deal with the pain anymore. Parked my car, and then there was no trucks.
So Ken, do you think he was suicidal?
Oh, yes. And I think that's what, ironically, that's what saved him, because he was walking down the street one night and he was at a real low, and on the corner was a Salvation Army meeting, like the open air meetings they used to have.
The story can best be told in Trickett's own words and is as follows. Mr. Field, having prayed for me, asked me to pray for myself, but my tongue seemed tied. Then he asked me to repeat after him this prayer. Lord Jesus, I do believe that thou didst die for my sins, and I feel and know that I am a sinner. Therefore, I come to thee, acknowledging my sins and seeking thy forgiveness. If thou wilt save me and make thyself known unto me, from this time forth I will live for thee and thy glory.
So, Jane, when you were growing up and you knew about his World Championship and you found out about that, did you know anything about the faith story?
I didn't actually. I actually took myself off to the State Library, I don't know how many years ago, but quite a few years ago, and found the Reverend Nee little booklet that is in the State Library. And I still remember as plain as day sitting on the train reading this copy, and tears were streaming down my face when I read of his conversion.
Wow.
Yeah.
There was just no trucks. And in the space of 10 minutes, when it could have been all over, I made the decision that I would call on the Lord and said, Lord, if you're real, and I know you are, I'm going to serve you for the rest of my life. But please help me deal with the pain. I can't deal with this pain anymore. A few days later, we go home to Burke, where my uncle is a pastor of a church out there. And he's singing this song in preparation for church. I get up from the back of the church, and he could see me coming, and he knew exactly what had just happened in my life. And I said, Uncle, I want to surrender my life to Jesus. Can you pray for me? And he just held me. Immediately said I was like a little boy trembling.
And from that day on, I've served the Lord passionately with all of my heart, because I knew I could not run anymore.